Thank you, Alfred. So, this is the first time I've met you, Alfred, but I've seen you for years. Downtown, Bar Bantam, walking towards Eastman or back from Eastman. So I understand you're from Taiwan. Are you?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you for spending 4 years in Rochester. He intends to spend another pursuing a marketing degree at U of R, right?
He's going to done everything on me.
Well, cool. And you're part now of RocGrowth, so use this as a resource and a way to connect further in the community. Thank you. All right. Cool. So we're going to keep to a tight schedule. We'll end at 7. RocGrowth is about empowering the new Rochester. And there are so many, it's not age dependent. It's just people who are innovative and creative. And we love sharing the stories of our community's great innovators and entrepreneurs. Many of them are portrayed up here. Many of them are in this room. And we also like to instigate these creative collisions. It's easier to do when we're all convening in person than via a computer and Zoom. And everything we do is informed by promoting greater equality of race, class, gender, and age. And that final plank in our platform is really, we carry that in our hearts, and it informs everything we do. So now I'd like to invite someone I've known for about 20 years, Steve Dubnik up here, so I can ask him a few questions and you could get to know. Do you want to sit on this side? Is this better, Paul, if he sits on this side? Yes.
Well, I'm deaf in this here, so I want to sit on this side.
Okay. Someone is probably calling me to tell me you can't make it. All right.
Can you hear me okay? I turn the mic back on?
All right.
All right.
So we just learned you have a hearing issue.
I do.
Okay, how did that happen? No, I'm joking.
Well, seriously, I had mumps when I was 5 years old, so prior to the MMR vaccine. And so one of the side effects of mumps can be that it deadens the nerve from your ear to the brain, and that's what happened to me. So I'm deaf and completely deaf in my right ear, and it's all I've known since it happened when I was 5. But for those of you who, not get political, vaccine shouldn't be political, get vaccinated. So
our guest is the president and CEO of the Strong National Museum of Play. We prepped, so I want you to tell us your origin story, because you have quite a background. You know,
Sure.
how'd you end up in Rochester? You're back, go back a little further.
Sure. So I'm originally from Georgia. Grew up in rural Georgia on a chicken farm. My parents were Polish immigrants from World War II, and so I'm first generation, ninth of 11 kids. So far down the totem pole, right? You know, so when you had the big table where the adults sat, the big kids sat, and I sat down here somewhere. And then I wound up going through MIT from Georgia and graduated in 1984. Rochester Telephone that's back when telecom deregulation was happening. So Rochester Tel was recruiting, and they recruited for their management development program, and I wound up taking a job with them and moving to Rochester. So worked 10 years in the phone company, stayed in telecom for a lot of years, was with a company called ACC when that company was sold, and then I was looking for other opportunities, and we had 2 young kids at the time. I was recruited to move elsewhere and run the company elsewhere, and I said, I'd like to go take that. I told my wife that, and she said, great, come home on the weekends. We had young kids, and so she had no interest in moving. So instead of doing that, I started a company. I started Choice One Communications, which grew quite, back in the dot-com boom, so it grew very rapidly, became a very large company here. In downtown Rochester, our main offices were over what is now called 5-Star building over there. Before coming downtown was anything at the time. We were very much at the nadir of what Rochester downtown became. But we were here, and we were committed to the city and doing things, and so we were there. And so I stayed there for quite a few years. The company ultimately went bankrupt, Chapter 11. I left shortly after that, and then kind of did a lot of, my kids were in their teens. I had the privilege of being able to spend time with them, travel with them when they were playing their different sports, dabbled in a lot of different things with them, a lot of different startups. I was part of RocGrowth from the very early stages because I was involved in several startups in the Rochester community at the time, and spent a lot of time in entrepreneurial efforts. During that whole time, I had been recruited to join the Strong Museum Board of Trustees. And so I joined that board in 2000, and I stayed on that board along with several other not-for-profit organizations in town. And I ultimately became chair of the Strong Museum Board. And when I was there, Raleigh Adams, I know some people here know him, because I've talked about a couple times. Raleigh and I became very close. We started working on the entire expansion project when the inner loop was being filled in. We started planning what could happen and worked very closely with that. And then ultimately Raleigh said, it's going to be a long project. I'm ready to go and turn it over to someone else to see that project through and go forward. And we started down the road recruiting an outside director of the museum, president of the museum, and then some other trustees came up, and ultimately they asked me, said, we're very concerned about bringing an outsider into Rochester at this stage, given we're committed to doing this project, given we have to do the fundraising, all those types of things. You've been part of this community for a long time, part of the Strong for a long time. You're passionate about what the Strong does. Would you consider stepping and taking this role? And so I did, and 6 years later, here I am. So that's my origin story.
Wow, that's the intangible. The tangible was evident on my walk here I lived on the other side of the inner loop fill, just maybe 100, 200 yards away. And it's quite remarkable. There's a whole new neighborhood. The museum has one of the most stunning parking lots. I really don't like saying that. And it has this big box that I don't know what's going on in there, but it's really colorful on the outside. They have this cool restaurant called Nirvana. What's going on? Tell us what this project is. It's really substantial, and I highlighted that the museum has national in the name. This is not just playing for local folks.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it's been so when we started planning, and the planning involved a lot of people. Originally, we talked about the fact that with the inner loop being filled, I mean, Strong had been through 2 expansions prior to this current one, right? So it was built in 1982. Went through its first expansion, opened in 1997, which was the glass atrium with Bill Gray's, or the diner inside it, and so on. Then it went through another expansion in 2000 that opened in 2006, added 135,000 square feet at the time to the museum. And so Raleigh has always had this aspect of either you grow or you die. Very much an entrepreneurial type of approach, and that carried on and carries on through our museum. So the opportunity came about with the inner loop being filled in and this land being created next to us to understand that given our location, it was maybe our last opportunity to expand in some way and control what was happening next to us. So we spent a lot of time talking to different constituents and consultants and so on, and thought about a neighborhood of play really being something that would be unique. And would it be something that would enable us to expand and grow while still controlling or working with people around us to have something that was complementary to what we were trying to accomplish at the museum. And so that really came to fruition working with some urban planning companies out of Pittsburgh. We did a lot of neighborhood charrettes, talking to people what they wanted to see, how they wanted to see it occur. And then we put all that together and then created this whole concept of what was really to be a walkable, livable, workable neighborhood that would be fun, energetic, and kind of this urban landscape. So when we created that, we also went out to look for partners. And one of the important things for us in terms of partners of development, because we're a museum, we're not a development company. So while we wanted a hotel, we wanted a mixed-use development, we didn't want to do it ourselves because that's not our expertise. That's not what we're good at. So we found partners, but what was very important for us was to find local Rochester companies who were committed to the community, who wanted to invest in community, who wanted to own for the long term and stay here. And so we didn't want to be part of a REIT. We didn't want to be part of that and deal with somebody in New York City or Chicago or wherever. We wanted people who were going to own and operate here in town. And so that's how we selected Konar Properties, who's our mixed-use development partner. I mean, they're in the 2nd generation here and continue just had a leadership change recently from a family leader to someone else who'd been a long-term employee there. And how we selected Indus Hospitality Group, which is also a 2nd generation hotel hospitality developer in town. And these are all people who haven't sold properties in their time. They continue to build and own, which was important to us about it. And so we collaborated and created this concept of the neighborhood of play, where we looked at that whole idea of having complete streets. We created our own street adventure place, which I had someone from the city, a month ago say how they use as an illustration that, yes, you can create a complete street that's friendly to walk on, friendly to bike on, but also supports car traffic coming through it, right? And so we put that all together. And so that's really what's happened so far. And so where we are, the museum is in the middle of a 90,000 square foot expansion. Well, the first phase of what we needed to do to get into the neighborhood, let me back up a second, is the museum owned 13.5 acres. The inner loop portion that was adjacent to us was a fairly slender sliver of land, and for our partners to build what they wanted to do, they needed property from us. For us to do that and to also accommodate what we were looking to be increased visitation, we decided to go vertical and build a parking garage, which I understand you detest, but you know what? People come from Pittsburgh and Cleveland.
I didn't say that precisely.
Yeah, all right.
They're necessary.
But the reality is the families who come here from Pittsburgh and Cleveland are not taking an Uber from there. I promise you, right? They've got their minivan, their SUV, and they're driving it into Rochester to come here. And so we built that, which enabled us to sell our partners 2.5 acres of land, enabled them to build what they have built. And what they have built, Konar has built 239 apartments there, about 17,000 square feet of retail space, of which about a third of it is currently occupied. And then Indus Hospitality built a 125-room Hampton Inn and Suites, a very family-friendly type of hotel to support the people who come to the museum. So that's that's what's going on.
You know, I did share with you. This is also about Steve. I think from the moment I met you, you showed a degree of humility that I did not see in every entrepreneur in the dot-com era. And what you just described is someone with an entrepreneurial background. I know telecom has regulatory aspects, and you may have to deal with government, but you jumped into that messy ring with that I would call public policy and politics, and working with the city and different agencies and organizations and developers. What equipped you for this? Do you have a lot of stories in a book in there somewhere?
So for those of you who are entrepreneurial, the number one skill you can have as a leader of an entrepreneurial entity is the ability to tell a story, right? And that needs to be the story of your company, the story of yourself, the story of your team. It's the ability to tell a story and convincingly, right? And hopefully you believe it. Hopefully you believe it, and hopefully it's true, but you got to be able to tell a story. And so truthfully, you know, when you talk about dealing with government entities, dealing with all those different things, the ability to tell a story and to convince people in Albany or the people in Washington, D.C. of the benefits that you're bringing, you know, you're sitting there telling them with certainty that I'm going to have 1 million people visiting this museum in 2025. And I believe it with all my core and all my heart that's going to happen. But it hasn't happened yet. But when I tell them, they believe it, and they give me money. It works. It works.
Great. So all of those who are aspiring to build companies, there you go. Work on your story. This is not the Strong I remember from 20 years ago, and my little kids, you know, kept me up at night, and I had to find something to do with them when I was half awake in the morning on Saturday or Sunday. Yeah, tell us about the target demographic, how things are shaping out, and why it might be called a museum rather than just a place to stick kids in front of at Wegmans checkout counter. Yeah, let's explore
Sure.
what you're calling the expertise of the museum. What the
So the thing to remember is that Margaret Woodbury Strong chartered what she called the Margaret Woodbury Strong Museum of Fascinations in 1968. That was the name she chose to use to represent her collections, her passions, and her desires. She passed away in 1969, you know, through an entire estate settlement process. The bulk of her estate was left to form and to support this museum that was created. When the museum was created and they brought in all these experts who evaluated her collections, all the people talked about the toy and play elements of her collections, but it wasn't a serious part of a museum at that time. So the museum was chartered as a history museum, and I can never get the exact words right, but basically looked at the life of the average American in the late 1800s to the early 1900s. You know, very scintillating topic, right? And it opened up in 1982, had 130,000 people visit the first year, and about 90,000 the second year, and about 60,000 the third year, and was on a steady decline. And then, you know, started recognizing the opportunity. People who were coming there were actually coming to look at the doll collection and the toy collections that were part of the overall collection. And so it started from that point in time, really started going forward and really recognizing that families and kids and so on were a key part of our constituents, what was coming, and started focusing more on that. So the museum under Raleigh opened up, you know, one history place. You know, we opened up Super Kids Market, and which became branded by Wegmans, but originally planned as Super Kids Markets. We opened up, we were the first museum that partnered with Sesame Street, Sesame Workshop, to create a Sesame Street type location in the museum. And that continued to drive things forward. So we're a museum because we are actually collections based. I mean, if you look at our museum, all exhibits have some form of collections that talk about the historical artifacts associated with the type of play that is being represented in that area of the museum. And that's really what we do is we really try to think about in all of our exhibits and all the places we are, what is the little kid going to do? What is a teen going to do? What's the adult going to do? What's the old adult going to do? And try to find something within all the spaces that can connect with each of those different people that are coming to see us. And we've been fairly successful. I will promise you, we have not been completely successful. We have a lot of flops. When we introduce a museum, we talk about version 1.0, 1.1, and 1.2. We make changes as we observe and see what's happening and how people interact with what we put out there.
Yeah. So how would you describe the demographic of your audience right now? I'm sure you have that data.
I have some data, right? So the demographic of our audience from an age perspective is we count, if you're 15 and under, you count as a child. If you're 16 and over, you're as an adult. Is how we track it. And we have about 53% of the people who come are 16 and over, but that obviously represents parents who are coming with the kids, or grandparents come with the kids who are part of that. But we are not your typical children's museum from the aspect we welcome adults only. I visited Boston Children's Museum early in my tenure, and I went there and I got a scarlet letter, literally, a scarlet A, right, to identify me as someone who was childless visiting a children's museum, just so they can keep a special look at me, I guess, even though I was a museum professional. But that's a practice of children's museum, but we're actually a museum that is open to everyone, and certainly we are very family friendly and pay a lot of attention to that and run a lot of programs for that. But we also run a lot of programs for adults. We just had our museum happiest hour this past Thursday, and we had 1,300 people come in to the museum, 21 and over, which we served beer and wine, and to my knowledge, they all had a great time. Looked like they did. Serve beer and wine. And they play. But the fun, I'll tell you, there's nothing more fun. We partner with the Simon School a lot of times, and they run a grocery games event in Wegmans. There's nothing more fun than to see a bunch of people out there, some of them in suit and ties still, who are out there pushing the little shopping carts around Wegmans, and they're trying to collect things and scan them out and hit this number in a certain period of time, and the closest person, like the guys' grocery games, right? Grocery games, and see that. But people play, and it's important. I mean, that's what we're about. We're the National Museum of Play, and play is a key part of living, right? We talk that play is literally a cradle-to-grave activity. If you think about a child, one of the first things they learn is through playing. They play peekaboo, right? But that is how they learn, and that's how a child learns. And even as an adult, you continue to learn different skills through different types of play.
And on the first floor, you have some tremendous quotes that are emblazoned, probably too high for the little kids to see. And one of them is from Maya Angelou, and she said, "You can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have." And when I saw this the other day while I visited the museum, I realized it was a natural connection to invite you and have you talk about the museum to RocGrowth and the role of creativity in trying to enhance our economy and restore the prosperity we once experienced, that the role of entrepreneurship and innovation and creativity is so important. And it's right there in the heart of downtown. So what's in that big box? Are you having when is the reopening, if you would call it,
so
taking place? Tell us more about what it's going to look like when that occurs.
Sure. So we are 99 days from opening the expansion. We will close. The museum will close. We hold our annual Juneteenth celebration with the community. Will be held on June 17th, which is a Saturday. We'll be open on June 18th. And then we will close, and we'll spend 11 days flipping the museum around, because you'll come in from a different direction than you do today. So there's a lot of reorientation that has to occur within the existing museum as well as the expansion. The expansion itself is focused very much on a video game type of play. The museum recognized in about 2007 that play, as we had been defining, was changing dramatically as people became more and more engaged in video games. And so we started our collections efforts around video games with traditional arcade games and artifacts related to that. But then over time, that's migrated more console games and cartridges, born digital games. We have the first digital curator, whose entire focus is how do we preserve those handheld flash games on your mobile? How do we preserve those games that never take a physical form? And how do we keep that playable and accessible to people down the road? So we really started focusing on that area. And we grew our collections within that. And as we grew, we really started looking at places where we might specialize our collections. And so one of the things we focused on was looking at people who are underrepresented. So we did a lot of women in gaming. So we had a terrific collection about women's role in technology. We looked at underrepresented races. And so we discovered, people who, Jerry Lawson, for instance, Jerry Lawson, who created at Fairchild the first cartridge, for those of you who are old enough to remember, inserting cartridges into consoles to play video games. He was the engineer at Fairchild who created that. And so we put a lot of effort into that. And then as we looked at this expansion, we really looked at the opportunity to talk about video games and both display our artifacts and talk about the history, but also talk about the benefits of video games. So within the expansion itself, the 90,000 square feet that's going to be there, the first level will be a new entrance atrium where you'll come in and if you've been there lately and you park in the garage, you come out the south side currently, you'll exit the north side and go through what we originally called the gateway, we now call the POP, the Portal of Play. Is the name we use for it. And that'll be an inside connector between the garage and the museum, and you'll come in through that way into a large entrance atrium. Above there will be a constellation or a kaleidoscope. Did you guys know that a group of butterflies is called a kaleidoscope? I didn't until about 3 months ago. But it's a kaleidoscope. So it'll be a kaleidoscope of about 140 butterfly lights. We partner with OLED Works in town, which is one of the preeminent manufacturers of OLED lighting here in Rochester. And they're lights that'll be 3D printed, hanging from the ceiling at different heights. They'll be computer controlled, where the lights will dim and brighten at different intervals, kind of make them look like they're flooding across the sky within that, and that'll be in the entrance atrium. Then you'll go through and you'll be able to go up or stay on the first level. If you go up in the expansion, there'll be 3 major exhibits up there. One exhibit will be called High Score, and it will be the new home of the World Video Game Hall of Fame that we trademarked in 2015 and started creating that. So that will be in there, along with talking about different aspects of video games. So we'll highlight the technology, we'll highlight the art, highlight the music, highlight the impact on society of video games and so on, will all be within that larger exhibit called High Score. The second large exhibit will be called Level Up, and it is an immersive, interactive video game experience. So when you go in, you'll receive an RFID bracelet. You'll create an avatar, an anthropomorphic avatar, where you'll use different heads, body, legs, and create your own avatar that'll register on your bracelet. And you'll take that with you, and you will play different games within that, and you'll score it. And we organized this around a fairly unique concept that we actually filed a patent on. We worked with some people at the University of Rochester around this, but if you think about video games, every video game has a primary action that you're taking, right? It may be you're moving, it may be that you're solving, maybe you're creating, maybe you're sharing, but video games are really organized around verbs, if you think about that. So we took the shape of a periodic table and have these 9 major categories of verbs, and then underneath there are subverbs. So under move, you might have run, jump, slide, crawl, etc. around there that fill in those blocks under the periodic table. And then as you play these different games and complete the games, that'll register and you'll fill in a handful of these blocks for each game that you play. And there'll be 30-something different activities in that space. And with the intention of ultimately you will fill in your own periodic table and we'll sell you a t-shirt with a periodic table on it. But it is a very unique way. One of the things I have the privilege of doing in my role is I spend a lot of time going to video game conferences, which is quite fun, and get to know a lot of executives and different developers and so on in the video game industry. And when we lay this concept out with them, they're like, wow, that's a great way to think about it. We never really thought about it that way, and they get it. They get it right away. And so they've really enjoyed what we're doing there. And what it really is highlighting is the skills development that you're getting from playing video games. All those different social skills that you develop from playing video games. And so that's the second one. And then the third one is going to be a gallery that focuses on the art of video games. because the actual artwork that goes in video games is quite stupendous. And so it's going to highlight that, and the initial...
The music, too.
The music too.
Yeah.
Music, too. Will be part of the art. And actually, the first game we'll be highlighting is the Age of Empires, which just celebrated its 25th anniversary from its initial release. So that's what's going in that upper level of that box. And then on the back side, not forgetting other things that we're doing, is we partner with Hasbro. Actually, Alan Hassenfeld, who was his family was the founder of Hasbro many years ago. And we're creating Hasbro Game Park. So on the back side of the museum, where the blue tortilla chip is, where a bus drop-off used to be, and now the current main entrance is, we're creating, it's an outside play area. But it's going to include things like a 20-foot tall, 5-headed, fire-breathing dragon. Literal. It is a dragon called Tiamat. Tiamat was the dragon that was on the cover of the Dungeons & Dragons set for the year that it was inducted into the National Toy Hall of Fame. So Tiamat will be there, and one of her heads will spew fires if you roll the T20 and get the proper number within that. And then there will also be some of these large Scrabble tiles, Candyland, Monopoly, all these things will be out there. So it's going to be quite a unique place.
Sounds like there's something for everyone.
That is literally the intention.
And the Hampton Inn might be full frequently.
We are introducing, for the first time in our history, when we reopen, we're going to have a multi-day pass. We've never done that before, but we'll have that available.
So let me just tell, what I hear too is Scrabble on the iPad kept my 81-year-old mother sane during COVID.
Yes.
And God knows, if you have toddlers, it's very comfortable sticking a screen in front of them and having them do something. I mean, gaming is not just for the Magic Center at RIT and all those incredible people, and it sounds like you've incorporated that within this expansion.
That is our goal. Again, when we think about it, when you go through and you play and level up, it'll be evocative of different types of games. But it won't be necessarily the actual classic game. So many of our controllers won't be this. There's one that I've actually demoed, which is kind of like an endless runner game where you're running a screen, you have a character through a landscape, and your character is collecting coins and tokens and gold, whatever that you run through it. But the control is a large exercise ball that is located between 4 pillars with rollers on it. So as you spin the ball, physically spin the ball, that is how you control the person running through the landscape. So it'll be very different than that. It'll be video games, but very different.
Okay, I have one more question that represents a bit of a transition, but is Laura Lentz here? Okay, Laura, we're going to have a couple of announcements in a moment, but you referenced the inner loop, Phil, as being the catalyst behind this sort of expansion, and the inner loop existed for a reason, which is quite shameful in our past. And I've seen you at every city council meeting I've ever been to, which means, and I only go to a fraction, you've done the work and you've immersed yourself in the community and the history. And I want you to speak to the boards, the trustees, and the museum's sense of commitment, responsibility to that neighborhood and to the city at large.
Sure. So, we are one of my personal things I've helped drive the museum my 6+ years there is that focus of being part of the community. We've from board down, we've diversified our board. My most recent board chair was a black educator from town, Cecilia Griffin Golden, who was a phenomenal mentor for me and help for me through different places in the museum and the staffing. So on, it continues to be something we work on and strive to do. We've introduced a variety of programs to make our guest population much more diverse in different ways. Everything from a SNAP discount program, so if you receive a SNAP benefits, you get a $5 admission price for you and up to 3 other people, to our most recent initiative is we partner with Jordan Health, where we worked with Dr. Harbin there and created a program where her constituents, who often are the underserved populations, if they complete their health well check, and their dental checkup, and so on, they need to do, they get a free day at the museum, including free lunches that we partner with our food vendors for that. And we tried that for 3 Saturdays last year. We've committed to 6 more Saturdays this year and working to that. So we really tried to diversify that. And then, in terms of our history and our past, while the museum purchased the land in late 70s, well after the urban renewal happened in Rochester and people were displaced, we're in an area that was called the Lost Neighborhood. It's called Lost Neighborhood by many people, and it was an area that had more than 1,000 different housing units of some type, mostly rented. Very diverse population within that, and so we've done our research on that. And one of the things we'll be doing outside is an exhibit called Play Happened Here, where we'll talk about how play has happened at different times in history, back to the 16, 1700s, where you talk about the indigenous peoples who populated these areas at the time and how they played and what types of games and play was important to them, to the 1800s, to the 1900s, and then on into the urban renewal efforts that happened. And we actually have a program, and I'm not ready to announce yet, where we've actually reached out and done a lot of, I have a lot of historians, which is actually great, because I can ask them to do things, and we've done a lot of research of who lived there at the time of the urban renewal, and we'll be doing some things around that post-opening.
Tremendous, tremendous. Wow. Laura, you want some airtime? I've known Laura for a bunch of years as well, and she's, again, a gift to the community and very passionate about her music. And Laura, why don't you come up here? If you don't mind standing, I'll give you the mic, and you have your 3 minutes.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
And Paul, are you going to? Okay.
Would you like me to just...
You know
Hi,
how to
everybody. Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Luntz. I am the artistic director and flutist for a group called 5x5. Has anybody heard of 5x5? How many of you know Jeff Spivak? How many of you know how he described 5x5? Does anybody know? Classical, loose in the toy store. How appropriate is it for me to be here? Classical, loose in the toy store. So he reviewed our debut album, Of In Between, and that's what he had to say about us. And actually, when you asked me to come, I thought, I will tell you a little bit about our connection to the Strong Museum and Kathy DeBellis, who's a goddess, yes. So we are a group of flute, clarinet, electric guitar, bass and piano, and audio and video engineer. One of our projects that I think typifies this classical loose in the toy store is our Playful Music project. We won a grant with the Genesee Valley Council on the Arts to commission new works for toys at the National Hall Toy of Fame. And one of them was Bubbles, and Puppet, and Super Soaker. And we performed these works at the Strong Museum. We did 3 performances. We did 5 performances at library branches around the city. And we also created some adaptive or sensory-friendly programming to accommodate further audiences. We had read that sensory-friendly or adaptive programming was not really being offered in the classical world. People would not feel free to yell out something or move around or perhaps shh, So we wanted to create a safe space for that. And so part of this Playful Music project was sharing these pieces that we commissioned for toys at the National Hall of Fame, Toy Hall of Fame, and also having sensory-friendly programming. So to finish this project, we've released a new album. It's called the Play Album, and there are 5. Of course, we're 5x5, right? There's 5 pieces on this EP. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Music, and it's been a great pleasure to put that album together. And you're going to be seeing a review of it fairly soon. You're going to also be able to find it on all those platforms. We hope you tap into the playful side of yourself and check out those recordings. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Let's just say 5x5. She's just scratching the surface. I think we could probably feature you with all the projects you didn't share. So how do they follow you?
5x5music.com.
Yeah.
5x5, FIVEY, all together. Tag on music.com. We are actually going to be putting together something for the eclipse. Who knows when the solar eclipse is on its way over? We're premiering
Okay, let's-
5.
We're going to have you get back. You'll have plenty of opportunities.
We're premiering 5 new pieces written for our group at the planetarium in January to get you ready for the eclipse. Thank you.
And that's a cool project, too. So, Barbara, please. Barbara Glassman is another person I've been fortunate to know for many years, is wearing a new hat temporarily. You're an interim director of the commissary. I'll let you share the real title, but please.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Barb Glassman, the interim president for the Rochester Downtown Commissary. And the commissary is an entrepreneurial exercise, or I should call project, that came out of the Downtown Development Corporation. It launched in 2020 in the heat of this crazy pandemic that we're getting ourselves out of. And what we do is help food industry entrepreneurs perfect and find, they use our registered commercial space to launch their products and their businesses. So they rent by the hour, they become members. We have a community of over 60 entrepreneurs right now who are launching their businesses, expanding. Many of them are new incubators, and others are existing businesses who are expanding what they're doing, and they're testing their products through the marketing opportunities that we bring through what we're doing. And I would love to support the entrepreneurs in our community, hoping that you would join us on April 31st. It's a week from Friday. Oh, let's start March. Oh, God, help me, please. All right? It's been a long day. We got a lot going on here. So, yes, on Friday, March 31st, from 6 to 9, downtown Rochester. We're located in the Mercantile, right there at the Sibley Building. From 6 to 9, we're having a fundraiser. It is really a big social party, folks. We are going to have 30 of our members offering sampling. Your ticket includes wine, beer, and soft waters, flavored waters. And we're looking for you to come in and let our members showcase what they're doing to grow the food and beverage industry here in Rochester. So I want to thank RocGrowth for the opportunity to be here. Please come in, support our members. We've got flyers on the table on the way out for you to go out and register on Eventbrite. It is going to be a big party. We're going to have a DJ spinning vinyls. We're going to have demos by multiple of our members showing how they prepare food. You can learn how to make your charcuterie board or hummus, and come on in and just enjoy the party. We really appreciate you coming and joining us. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you. We may have some time for a few questions, but Tom, do you want to say something at the very end? Okay, we'll have some closing remarks. But Steve, what do you do for play?
Well,
what's the truth?
the truth is I play golf, I read, I play board games, and occasionally play a game of distant chess with my son.
All right. Cool. Any questions from the audience? Let's keep it short, okay? You know, like succinct, I mean. Yeah, please.
My boyfriend's blind. He plays a game on Alexa, Sight Manager. Will there be any games for people that are visually impaired?
We will have some accessibility. That's a key part for us. We actually have a board member who is blind, and he pushes us very hard on that, so we work for that. I don't know particularly what we're doing, but every time we talk about it, he asks that question.
When I think of video games, I just think of like shooting and violence, and I realize it's a kids museum, so what can you tell me kind of about that?
So a couple things. We talk about it, and there's been a lot of studies that talk about violence don't beget violence in terms of real life, right? We tend to put, we don't have a lot of violent games out there, but we have some. They tend to be games, Halo is there for sure. We have, the fighting games, which have been in the Hall of Fame. And we provide information, and the parents make the choices, what they want to do with it. I mean, they're segmented in certain areas, and those are areas that can be avoided if somebody chooses to.
Yeah, Mark?
You talked about grand vision and small steps. I remember one History Place when it opened and my kids went there. I think we had an annual pass to go. My question is, was that strategic as a pilot? And how much patience did you have to just say, we have this grand vision, but we just have this little box in the back of the room? Like, did you have that grand vision way back then?
So one history place predates my involvement in it a little bit. But it's part of it. I mean, there was a goal of, the museum's taken a very deliberate entrepreneurial effort to grow with the intention of being more influential for Rochester and having a larger audience. And so multiple times we've done studies, marketing studies, to see what people are interested in and who's coming and how do we expand that. And so while you start with that and you see where people are going, you say we need to do more things that target this audience, and we look for opportunities to do so. And so, yes, but it hasn't been like a 20-year master plan. It's been, this is working, where do we go next?
I see 3 at the moment. Let's get through to those 3 if we have enough time. So I'm going to go to my right. Yes, sir.
Have you ever considered bringing IMAX theater? I don't believe there's one in Rochester. Is there one?
Not a true IMAX. Tinseltown.
IMAX with the surround sound, the whole thing? Okay.
Yep.
Withdraw my question.
So you learned something.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Steve, you've got me really excited about going back. It's probably been 20 years. I'm looking for members, and then the kids come up, I forgot about it, so I'm excited. But, you know, the Museum of the Moving Image in New York, that's what I'm thinking about when you say that. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the museum in Cleveland. So tell me, like, when you visit museums, like, what's your experience when you sort of look around the field? And I would love to hear that.
Sure, I've visited both those museums. I've been to both of them. I will tell you, I think, you know, this won't be humble. We're better than that. You know, we really focus. The Strong Museum has for a long time been a leader in the museum industry in terms of interactivity and how do you incorporate education into and the history aspects of it into the interactive elements. You know, you go through the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and a lot of interesting things to look at, but you don't get to do anything, right? You know, while if you go through our Women in Games exhibit, it was one of my favorites. We actually put it up for a 6-month temporary exhibit for a certain reason, but it became so popular we left it up, and we're now it's being integrated into our expansion as kind of a trail through high score. But when you went through that, you got to see and understand what Amy Hennig did, right? So Amy was the writer and creator of Uncharted and a variety of games like that. But at the same time, then you also got your opportunity to try to create your own plot and your own story. You got to watch someone who composed music for a video game and learn about what they did. But then we gave you experiences where you can sit there and you can try different tracks and different instruments and see how you could compose. So we really tried to blend both the educational aspects of it and the do something aspects of it versus just look at it. And so that's probably the key differentiation in terms of how we present a museum versus the Museum of the Moving Image or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And we actually draw more people than both of those do.
A factoid, a useful one, right? So there's one final. I think there was a woman I saw over
Nancy.
here. Was it Nancy?
Nancy had her hand up.
Nancy Gong. All right. Yeah.
Just kind of curious if there's been any collaboration with RIT?
Yes, there has been collaboration with RIT. We work closely with RIT actually in many ways. From everything from we have a partnership with them where they provide us interns who help us on our exhibits in different ways. To Steve Jacobs, who does a lot of video game work, and Steve actually carries a fellow title at the Strong Museum and works closely with us. To we are part of the Digital Games Industry Association here in Rochester, which focuses on the video game industry, and we support that and help lobby for video game technology, growth of that industry here in town. So we're very tightly connected to RIT.
So let's wrap up. I want to be punctual, and I expect, Steve, you'll be around a little bit longer, huh? A few minutes?
A few minutes.
Okay, so I saw at least one remaining question. Maybe you can ask that directly of Steve. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
I appreciate your attention tonight,
great.
and it's great.
I wanted, before we wrap up, I want to acknowledge, first of all, this exceptional person who's coming up here, Tom Myers, is, Chris Cooley is in attendance. We have Todd Fleming is out under, some virus got him. I'm not sure which one. Joshua Batres, one of the newer volunteers, thank you. He was at the registration desk. We have George Mariri, who's pitching in and was getting the emails out and social media posts. Thank you so much, guys. Mike Thaney, who is not available, but co-founder of Startup Grind Rochester, and they have an event tomorrow night, a pitch event at Great Lakes Gaming in the Innovation Square. And we have newer additions to our committee. We have Adam Mashali, who I don't believe is here, and Lydia Palmer, who's out of town. And she's going to help us produce our next coffee event. We're resuming those in person as well, and that will be in Barbantum on April 21st. That's a Friday morning. So if you're on our list or follow us via social media, you'll hear about that. And again, every first Thursday, as long as people show up and have smiles on their face, we'll continue doing first Thursday creative collisions at Rock Brewing, which is more unstructured. And we have typically 40, 50 people. Many of you have been attending, and we do get a lot of younger people. It's emboldening to see recent graduates or students from either campus or both campuses actually show up and interact with the broader community. So, Tom, here, for the final word.
Richard said a lot of it, and that is, it takes a team to get this going. We meet weekly. All this is volunteer work. We do it because we believe in Rochester. Richard pours his heart out finding speakers and working with us every week. And so it's not an easy thing, but we keep it going because it's important. We all need to work together. This has been a great event. We have over 67 people attending, of which over 60 are in this room. The Zoom is live. All this is recorded. It will be put up onto our website, so you can share it if they want to mention it to other people. I also want to thank the Three City Center for hosting us here, Paul of Envision Productions for videoing, and we have more pizza in the back. Native cooked it, and all our sponsors that have helped us pay for anything that we do. So it's all volunteer, and enjoy. Have creative collisions. If you see anybody standing in a group, walk over, just stand there and listen, or join the conversation. That's what it's all about. Take care.